Hello again, Struck Quap. Today I'm bringing you 3 videos as an overview or a breakdown of the update for Dummies patch for Torchlight 3, which was released yesterday, September the 15th, 2020. So here it's this part 2 for update for Dummies patch summary. In this part you would see information about forts, about the Fazeer's Dunj'Djinn, about monsters and changes to the relics and relic skills. I'm going to go through them in order of appearance in the actual patch notes on Steam, link for those in the description. So let's start with the forts. Now a little bit of info about the forts. They've increased the camera distance for forts, reduced the depth of field so that things aren't blurry from the distance. They fixed the rotation of fort passages to be more hid so that objects on the left side of the fort can be seen. And they've enabled the training them in the fort. Big yes from me here, yes in capitals. I love it, it's amazing. I've been waiting for such a thing for so long. Thank you very much for that training dummy. They've made a better default fort, I'm not sure what better means, but okay. The players can now report forts as inappropriate. Okay. They fixed an issue where a fort asset preview and description stop updating to the current selection after you've placed the decoration. They lowered the prices on all common and magical quality fort buildings. They lowered the harvesting and refined resource prices on some of the rare decorations, increased the gold prices a bit on some of the rare and legendary fort decorations. They fixed an edge case where quest rewards that go into the fort inventory could be lost, fixed issues that prevent the work tree from being interactable after initially placing it, updated the tuning on the fort monument leveling rate to better match our goals, and the goblin and high-wit monuments increased in required currency, whereas the automaton monument decreased slightly to make them kind of more even. They've added a temporary fix for pet enchantment resistance being not functional. Not a permanent temporary, so maybe there's gonna be a new fix later. They fixed an issue where the enchanting description would show a different possible affix each time rather than all possible affixes. Pretty happy that this has been fixed again to work how it used to. They moved the enchanting counter from the skill station subcategory and they were not even sure what it was even doing there, and now it's in the crafting subcategory. The enchanter's outer once again unlocks after completing the core gateway. And Sergeant Clive will unlock the enchanter's outer fort prop in the tutorial, simply enchanting account quest, and the prop will no longer appear under the functional tab by default until then. They've updated the Legendarium and Enchanting tutorial pop-ups to no longer require the Enchanter's Outer to break down legendary items to gain Legendarium passive, since they unlock automatically on pick up. Now moving on to changes for the Fazeer's Dunj'Djinn. They fixed an issue where the angered ancestor ghost does not follow the player if they run too far away. They fixed issues where leaving and re-entering the area in multiplayer spawns an additional ancestor ghost. They lowered the chance that a pet cage is in the boss arena at the end of map works, which is Fazeer Dunj'Djinn face or map scroll, and that's lowered from 50% to 30%. And the Fazeer's Dunj'Djinn beneficial affix reliquarian and the detrimental affix curd relic will no longer be picked up for the same card, because it was kind of silly when you got them in any ways, like something that gives you one thing and another thing that completely negates it. It was fun, but silly, the silly kind of fun. Talking about the Fazeer Dunj'Djinn, I'm not seeing a lot of changes there, so are they planning a big Fazeer's Dunj'Djinn related patch? Where they're doing a big overhaul of this now very boring experience. Is there gonna be a big overhaul of the Fazeer's Dunj'Djinn with the next big update? I certainly hope so, cause only seeing 5 lines of text for the Fazeer's Dunj'Djinn definitely seems to maybe hint at leaving it for later, for a different patch centered around mostly Fazeer improvements. So now let's move on to monsters. They fixed a lot of issues with a lot of monster spawns, with a lot of environment based things with the monsters. You can see some of the things that I've highlighted on the screen. I cannot talk about all of them, But you can see Monster Hazard updates doubled Goblin Grenade damage and decreased damage from Acidic and Poison Hazard from 150 to 120. And this Acidic and Poison Hazard from 150 to 120 is not enough of a decrease, because I still think it's too much. I'm gonna test it, and I think I've already tested it on the test realm. They've reduced the damage from the Blazing Affix and prevented pets from being damaged by it. They created a separate version specifically for Bruce Killis to reduce his threat without having to lower the difficulty of the affix throughout the game. There's other changes, such as change the monster spawn logic for many areas so that they do not request common rarity monsters or request them less often, so that they don't get an imbalance in the rarity of monsters, leading to things like the phase beasts, witches or fire sentries spawning too frequently. They've converted regular boss spawners to trigger boss spawners in mini boss kill you suck areas to prevent wandering creatures and premature fights. They fixed issues where we won't get boss kill credit when playing multiplayer, or when just killing a boss after resurrecting. They've reduced the number of monsters in the Spider, Netherrim and Hivit packs. So there's other things like Chill reducing the monster movement speed down to 25% regardless of difficulty instead of 50%. And when that is applied, so on ridiculous difficulty, it essentially just puts monsters at normal move speed. They've increased the duration of the base Chill affixes slightly. Gravity Well is now an affix only for the challenge dungeon, and Netherwell now is picked for champions half as often as other affixes. They fixed an issue where Storm Sand affix would sometimes stick around after the pack of champions has died, which I was hoping would finally get fixed, but the same fix needs to be applied to the acidic end as well. They've increased the cooldown on the Netherwell monster affix from 6 seconds to 10, so that you get a bit more breathing room between Netherwell hazards, and the monster affix Netherwell now cannot appear until level 15 zones. Other things like double the damage by witches, increase the hit points of the witches. And why double the damage by the witches? Have you noticed how strong the witches hazard is? It could kill you within 1 or 2 seconds if you don't move away from it on time. This rotating thing on the ground. So maybe on the test realm, when I was getting this much damage, it was based on this double damage, and I'm not a big fan of this. I'm not a big fan of this because witches, sometimes you wouldn't even see where they're hiding, and then boom, out of nowhere in the middle of a fight, even on a super resistant tanky build, you get so much damage from those hazards from the witches. They've improved the XP curve for player leveling. It's now at about 150% of the old XP curve. I'm not a big fan of this. I'm not a big fan of how much more XP we require now to level up. I liked it much better how it was before. I felt like I could progressively just keep doing the Fazeer after level 46 and just level up equally with my content, never finding myself in a situation where I would be fighting content 4, 5, 6 levels higher than me. If I just keep going from one level to the next and so on without repeating. But now the developers want us to repeat one level over and over and over and over again. Sometimes you will need to repeat a level 3-4 times just so you can catch up with the content level. It's not fun. It's definitely not fun. They support separate monster damage curves per difficulty level now. I've adjusted the monster HP curve to make it less of a swag at higher difficulties. Again, hopefully that's fine. I mean, with certain builds it can still be a swag, so maybe they should just rebalance certain builds to be a little bit stronger than others, and then maybe it would be fine. They smoothed out somewhat jarring increase in monster health between levels 7 and 10. They set the monster health at low levels 1 to 20 of painful and ridiculous to be the same values as those at normal difficulty, which is pretty nice. They've adjusted the painful and ridiculous health curves to compensate for the base damage reduction by difficulty level. And the dev note here is adding more health to monsters at higher difficulty levels is necessary to push players to optimize damage dealing, but they went overboard last time and it did not get enough dedicated testing. Too much health leads to combat being a slog, which we do not want. We hope that these new variants maintain the challenge we intend at each difficulty level without making damage dealing tiresome. Well, in certain cases that's still the case. That's still the case in certain builds. Even if you optimize your build sometimes, there's just so much you can get. You can't expect a player to have an optimized build before they reach level 60 or level 50 plus. Why? Because first of all, you nerf the drop rates of legendary items. Second of all, there is no system that allows us to reroll affixes, so how do you expect people to optimize their build without the tools to do so? The only tool for optimizing the build is grinding, and you can't expect someone who is leveling up to have an optimized build. That's just preposterous. The only way you would have an optimized build while leveling up is if you've leveled a bunch of outs and saved up a bunch of out gear, a bunch of legendaries for the legendarium, a bunch of legendaries to equip while leveling up, and a bunch of very good road blue items. So that is super bad to expect people to optimize their build while leveling up and to be actually min-maxed while leveling up for the hardest difficulties. I think this should be something only needed for level 60 plus content. If you're not 60 plus, how are you expecting your players to be optimized before level 60, before spending hundreds of hours of farming for certain items? If you add a system where we can reroll affixes for the price of legendary blue and green powder, to be able to change one affix to another one that could roll on this place, the same way we do in other games. I'm not gonna name some, but there are many games that use such a system. So here I just don't agree how they're doing the difficulty thing. And I still think that playing on practice is much more difficult than it should be. If it's practice, it should be the easiest difficulty. It should be like a walk in the park. But right now I can get one shot even in practice while leveling up. Not sure why, not sure if it's a bug. But there are certain things, especially traps on the ground, that can one-shot me even on practice, the easiest difficulty in the game. And I still find that I'm getting under-leveled, and I end up fighting level 21 bosses at level 17, and it just really needs to be reworked. I'm not a big fan of this change as well. So here's some numbers. They've increased the regular monster damage versus players. Hard 140 to 300%, painful 165 to 500%, ridiculous 240 to 800%, and that is, mind you folks, without considering extra percentages added from the Fazeer's Dunj'Djinn increases after you reach level 60 and you start getting extra damage and movement speed and HP each challenge level. So those numbers are alarming. They've increased the champion monster damage versus players on hard, ridiculous and painful 125 to 200, 150 to 400, 216 to 600. Again, alarming increase of the numbers. They've increased the boss monster damage versus players from 100 to 200 on hard, on painful 110 to 400, ridiculous 160 to 600. Again, that's without the Fazeer extra bonuses, alarming numbers again. Increase the player damage versus regular monsters. Painful 40 to 45, which is actually a buff to the players, nerf to the enemies, and this was really needed. And on ridiculous from 30 to 45. And that's again versus regular monsters. So the same has been done versus champions on painful from 40 to 45. And versus bosses on painful from 40 to 45. And on ridiculous versus bosses, players do from 25 to 30% damage. So 5% damage reduction has been removed from the enemies on ridiculous, on bosses. They've raised the amount of player damage applied to monsters due to the number of players in an instance. So they've added a difficulty increase based to how many players are in the party, but we don't get more rewards by having more players in the party, so this really needs to be looked into. You have to make things more rewarding. Yes, we do get 15% gear work, which results in 15% more drops. But is that enough? Is that enough to make it worth playing with 2, 3, 4 players? I know it's easier, the game gets easier when you have more people because you're buffing each other with different pet auras and with different things like Walk Away Storm and Cloak of Flames and Miasma and so on that can give you damage and other buffs. But I think they need to look more into how rewarding it becomes when you have more people to make up for the difficulty increase. Then they've increased the monster movement speed by difficulty level. On hard 10% to 20, on painful 25% to 35. Again, this seems super unnecessary. I've talked to developers and I completely disagree with what they're saying. They're saying that this has been done to counter kiting builds. But what I'm finding right now is that I find myself kiting on melee builds, not just on range builds. On tanky melee builds I find myself kiting because there's sometimes so many enemies swarming me, so I'm expecting to get into a group of enemies, kill them without pulling the aggro of the nearby enemies and getting those nearby enemies to reach me before I'm done with the first group. So I'm pulling group A, B and C together by attacking group A. And then by the time group A has been killed, normally I would have been ready for group B and C, but now I'm gonna start attacking group A, and I'm not gonna be finished with group A, and then group B and C would reach me, and then I would have to start kiting. I would have to get out of danger, and it's weird when you're kiting on melee builds, when you have to kite on melee builds, and it definitely doesn't help anyone having all that movement speed. It just makes things boring and it pushes you into specific builds. It pushes you into playing only one type of playstyle. And do the developers want to limit us in such a way? I guess they do, but is it fun? It definitely isn't fun to me. I'm not sure about you. They've decreased the base health of immobile, non-attacking monsters, corrupt hive with crystal, Vultura Cove, etc. by approximately 25%, so that they are still tough enough to still provide the layering gameplay needed, but at higher difficulties won't be quite as much of a slog. And the dev note here is we also made difficulty choice a required step during character creation, so you don't accidentally get stuck with a difficulty shield you didn't want. Additionally, we added a general description to the difficulty menu to explain what changes by difficulty level. Thankfully, that's the thing now, so people would know all the changes, all the invisible changes, such as extra fame increases when playing on a harder difficulty. And this kind of is my highlight of all the monster things. There's a lot more on the website, you can check. Link in the description. Now, Relics. There's a lot of changes to Relics. Again, I've highlighted some things that I like to talk about. They've added a failsafe to draining relic power, so they will deactivate if for some reason the proc that should deactivate them fails. It appears to fail if the player is stunned in that exact moment. The drain bar series of relic skills now show their buff indicator on the buff's UI. Elemental damage provided by relic passives has been standardized to 25% the intended value. Some were still at 50%, and this is wrong. It has been completely removed. This is an old patch note and it has been removed. It's not 25%, it has been removed. So you're gonna notice this later. So there's fixed an issue where creatures summoned via relic skills, for example the Ice Golem, do not follow prayers inside or outside side dungeons or to the boss areas. Now, relic weapon mastery skills no longer give bonuses to all relic damage while that weapon is equipped. Each of those passives now has a unique proc effect on basic hit, and you can now with Mage use Digitus on all relics to proc that. On Realm Master you can use Rail Hammer, and on Sharpshooter you can use bow. And for forged, well, it's forged, it's the least left from the devs. So forged doesn't have a second weapon, it doesn't have a quas weapon other than the cannon that they can use to trigger those. So they're stuck to using whatever the relic makes them use. So you can see some of the changes. The Flaming Destroyer Giant Swings now has a chance on basic hit to trigger a powerful flame shockwave. The Shocking Force now grants a chance to quickly call down 3 lightning strikes. The Blood Drinker's Blades for Cutting now grants chance to create a Dead Blade, which is a smaller version of the Dance of Death, for 6 seconds. And Staffing Up has a chance on hit to summon an enchanted staff for 20 seconds. And Large Boars grants a chance on basic hit to fire a trio of icicles in a tight cluster. Now, Blood Drinker's Blood Seeker's buff now fires double missiles at tier 3, which is actually amazing. I loved using one of those in one of the builds. They've changed the Spinning Blade relic cost back to 25 instead of 20 to put it in line with all other relic 25 cost skills, and they've also reworked the reduction to this to be in line with the others. They made the proc Spinning Blades from tier 1 bonus actually appear on the client. Frost Nova passive now functions. The trigger on removing Frostskin was not hooked up. Frostskin passive now triggers Frost Nova. Previously it only triggered from the barrier skill. And this is one of my favorites, fixed an issue where Snowstorm does minimal damage, which is 1, and yes, now it does damage, so I can't wait to test this. Thank you very much for this. And Vocalize Storm's hit skill shape now replicates, which should help fix missing VFX. And fixed an issue where Electrode's Vocalize Storm would mistakenly target the Sharpshooter's Ghostly Brute. Added the word chance to Firestorm description so it reads correctly, and fixed an issue with Flaming Destroyer's Magma Burst skill not having a skill description. But Firestorm says that there is a cooldown, but I think there isn't a real cooldown, even though it says there's a 4-second cooldown. I've noticed it triggering more often, so I guess they just need to remove that in the description. They fixed an issue where Flaming Destroyer summoning Smash tier 1 does not spawn at target location. And they're not mentioning anything about nerfing the Sword Smash. The Flaming Destroyer Sword Smash, that was super overpowered and super cheesy. If you want an easy build, it was just super easy to get OP build with just spamming Sword Smash and doing 2-3 million damage. Spider Queen from Bane Milestone Swap now properly interacts with enemy monsters. The next part of this series would be about changes to the pets and changes to the skills and classes, general and specific ones. If you want to watch this one, you could use the link in the description of the video or in the comments section, as well as you can click on the videos that should show up on your screen at the end. You could also hit the subscribe button if you want to get notified for more content updates, and press the bell button to not miss out the notifications when I upload builds, guides, and other videos like this one for news and overviews of patches, for games like this one and this one including. Thank you for watching Struck Club, until next time, and goodbye.